I'm sharing a special C.S. Lewis insight with you today. The 10 Ways Demons Can Affect Your Life. In his beloved novel, The Screwtape Letters, C.S. Lewis presents us to Screwtape, a skilled demon who instructs his nephew Wormwood via letters on how to control human souls. Brothers and sisters in Christ, get ready for a life-changing spiritual adventure that may alter your perspective. It's crucial to keep in mind that Screwtape is speaking about God when he speaks of the enemy. Screwtape is a monster, after all. In light of this, let's examine some important realities about the spiritual life and see how our journey might be influenced by the harmony between the material and spiritual selves. Goddess will show you the genuine meaning of faith, a faith that transcends transient feelings, how pain can serve as a bridge to God, and how true joy originates not from worldly goods, but rather from a profound relationship with one's Creator. In addition, we will discuss the significance of living in the present and the worth of humility, always with the intention of bolstering our faith. Recall the words found in Romans 8:5 and 6. People who live according to their flesh have their minds fixed on what their flesh wants. On the other hand, people who live in harmony with the Spirit are focused on what the Spirit wants. A mind controlled by the body is governed by death. A mind controlled by the Spirit is governed by life and tranquility. You'll have a fresh understanding of how to strengthen your spiritual life and your relationship with God by the end of this film, and we'll give you the chance to participate in a beautiful prayer. Hi there. We are sincere devotees. You are here for a reason, if that makes sense. We think God has brought you to us for a reason, and He has a plan for your life. I must ask that you like, subscribe, and share our content with your loved ones if you like it. Let's get the video started right now. Initially, have you ever pondered why there are moments when it seems like God is more present, as though suffering somehow serves as a bridge to get us closer to Him? God genuinely cares for us and brings us closer to Himself via our sorrow and suffering. Screwtape mentions something unexpected about God's endeavors to have a soul by His side all the time. He depends more on adversity and dips than on happy peaks. Deeper valleys than anyone else have been faced by some of His favorites. The explanation is because humans are like food to us. Our goal is to gain more power at their cost by absorbing their will. However, God's purpose is distinct. He desires beings who voluntarily choose to resemble Him rather than becoming like Him because He has conquered them. Cattle are to be used as food, right? He desires sons to be His servants because we are empty and long to be full. He is bursting at the seams. This Screwtape thought illuminates a profound truth about God's love and the reason behind suffering. God shapes us and draws us nearer to Himself during the most trying times in our lives because of His boundless love and wisdom. God works most closely in these valleys, in these times of anguish and suffering. Like it says in Romans 5:3 and 4, our souls are being carefully crafted. Furthermore, we take great pride in our hardships because we understand that they breed tenacity, character, and optimism. Contrary to popular belief, God is most visible and actively involved in our lives during difficult times. He desires more from us than just compliance. He wants us to develop into His offspring, bearing witness to His presence even in the darkest hours. The difficulties we encounter are not intended to break us, but to grow us into something more. Consider the way a sculptor manipulates a marble block. He must chisel away at every detail with both vigor and accuracy. Similar to this, God shapes us through adversity to get us ready for something bigger. How about you? Have you ever experienced a trying period and afterwards recognized that you were stronger and closer to God? Perhaps God was closer than you realized. Second, despite being human, we are spiritual beings. Consider this. There are two universes that we exist in. There are two types of existence. The physical, where things are always changing, and the spiritual, which is constant. We humans are always hopping between these two realms. Humans are amphibians, part spirit, half animal, according to Screwtape. As animals, they live in time, but as souls, they are a part of the everlasting world. This implies that although their souls can be focused on an everlasting object, their bodies, imaginations, and passions are ever-changing. Being timely implies evolving. Therefore, the closest thing they have to consistency is undulation, repeatedly rising to a level from which they descend repeatedly, a sequence of peaks and troughs. This explanation aids in our comprehension of day-to-day life. We are in a state of perpetual oscillation between the transient, our spirit, and the permanent, our desires and emotions. Furthermore, Corinthians 4:18 cautions us. As a result, we focus on the invisible rather than the visibly, because the visible is fleeting and the invisible is permanent. Screwtape makes the point that because we are fallible beings, we experience highs and lows, periods of spiritual clarity interspersed with periods of uncertainty. Have you ever noticed how your daily troubles may bring you down even after experiencing a moment of spiritual strength? This is the battle we face. Seeking consistency in the face of change, we are continuously attempting to strike a balance between the spiritual and the material. Learning to keep our eyes on the eternal even when we are swept away by our feelings and desires is the real voyage. On our journey towards the divine, we all experience highs and lows like to those on a spiritual roller coaster. Third, according to 2 Corinthians 5:7, since we are blind and live by faith, we may frequently be tempted to mistake faith for how we feel, yet doing so can cause us to lose sight of faith's actual meaning. Screwtape demonstrates how the enemy tries to divert our attention from God by getting us to concentrate on our emotions. As Screwtape puts it, we are defeated whenever we as humans turn our attention toward the enemy God. However, there are strategies to stop them from doing so. The easiest technique is to divert their attention from him and back to themselves, observing their thoughts and attempting to elicit emotions via their own volition. Let them try to fake sympathy for themselves instead of seeing that this is what they are doing when they intended to ask for help. Let them genuinely be attempting to feel brave when they meant to pray for courage. Allow them to be attempting to experience forgiveness when they say they are praying for it. Instruct them to determine the worth of every prayer by assessing its ability to elicit the intended emotion. Screwtape exposes a frequent trap, the desire to gauge our faith by our emotions. He counsels his seducers to get people to concentrate more on their feelings than on God. It is simple to mistake faith for how we are feeling at the time, believing that prayers are only heard when a certain feeling is experienced. Have you ever prayed for bravery but secretly tried to summon up the courage or asked for forgiveness, only to feel as though you weren't forgiven because you couldn't feel it? Screwtape wants you to believe that religion is dependent on sentiment, and that is exactly what it is doing. True faith, however, transcends feelings. It matters not how we feel, but rather how much we trust God, even in the absence of any feelings. When we live by faith, we keep God in mind, even on the days when we don't feel motivated or moved. Our faith ought to be rooted in the knowledge that God is always with us, regardless of how we are feeling, rather than ebbing and flowing with our emotions. Fourth, all goodness originates from God. Every good and perfect gift, according to James 1:17, originates from above and comes from the Father of the heavenly lights, who is unchanging like shifting shadows. According to Screwtape, forcing your man to use alcohol as a pain reliever when he's dull and exhausted is far more likely to turn him into a sound drunk than encouraging him to use it as a way for pals to have fun when he's joyful and expansive. Never forget that we are, in a way, on the enemy's territory, while we are enjoying any kind of pleasure in a normal, healthy, and fulfilling way. I am aware that we have gained many souls via pleasure. Nevertheless, it is not our innovation, it is his. The delights were made by him. So far, all of our research has not allowed us to create one. All we can do is get others to indulge in the joys that our enemy has occasionally, in certain ways, or to the extent that he has forbade. Screwtape exposes a crucial fact. All of life's joys and beautiful things are gifts from God. The enemy, however, attempts to manipulate us so that we abuse these joys. For example, by overindulging or seeking fulfillment at inappropriate times. Ever wonder why eating, which is generally considered a healthy act, may become dangerous when consumed in excess? God bestowed these joys upon us to be savored in moderation and purpose. They can derail us from our actual goal if we abuse or overindulge in them. Our task is to develop a balanced approach to using the blessings that God has bestowed upon us. We ought to acknowledge that these happy times are gifts from God intended to make our lives better and bring us nearer to Him. Knowing this, we shall rejoice in the pleasant things without allowing them to rule us or pull us away from the Goddess. Fear is a liar. Fifthly, how are we aware of this? It says in 2 Timothy 1:7 that the Spirit God gave us gives us strength, love, and self-control, rather than making us afraid. According to Screwtape, we want him to experience as much ambiguity as possible so that his thoughts would be occupied by conflicting visions of the future, each of which inspires either fear or optimism. Nothing like a sense of tension and worry to turn a person's thoughts against their enemy, God. He wants males to take responsibility for their actions. It is our responsibility to keep them contemplating their future. Screwtape is implying that fear can be a potent diversion from the goddess. He wants us to be mired in worry about the future and all the possible outcomes when we concentrate on the what-ifs and forget to live in the now and put our faith in God. Have you ever become paralyzed by your worst-case scenario imagination? Fear entangles our minds and keeps us from taking action or believing in God's plan. We start to feel uneasy and nervous, constantly anticipating the worst. But as it states in Isaiah 41:10, "Do not fear, for I am with you." God calls us to live a different kind of life. "Since I am your God, do not be alarmed. I'll support and fortify you. I will use my righteous hand to uphold you." He wants us to trust that He is in charge of the future and to put our attention on the here and now, on the decisions and actions we can take right now. Fear urges us to worry about potential outcomes, but God commands us to live in trust by having faith in His promises. Though it may appear genuine, fear is a delusion that diverts our attention from the reality that God is constantly with us, directing our actions. The calm that fear seeks to steal is ours when we put our trust in Him. We must put our trust in God, live in the now, and act morally today in order to conquer fear. Sixth, nothing can be legitimately claimed as our own. Have you ever given it any thought how easily we become agitated when we believe that we are being refused something? Our feelings of rage are not limited to confronting issues. They also stem from the conviction that some of our rights have been violated. Are we really in control of time, objects, or even ourselves? According to Screwtape, mankind become enraged not by random misfortune, but by misfortune seen as harm. Additionally, the perception of harm is contingent upon the perception that a valid claim has been rejected. Therefore, the more life claims your patient can be made, the more likely it is that he will feel hurt and become irritable. You have to fervently preserve the odd notion that my time is my own in his head. Give him the impression that he is the rightful owner of 24 hours at the beginning of every day. The planet, the globe, and everyone who lives on it are all the Lord's, according to Psalm 24:1. How often have you become frustrated because you were running late, stuck in traffic, or in a long line? Don't we feel as though our time has been taken? Is it truly ours, though? We are prompted to consider this profound illusion of possession that ensnares the human heart by Screwtape's crafty voice. Anger is not limited to the experience of disaster. When we believe that our rights have been infringed, that is, the idea that we have control over time, things, or even our own existence is what gives rise to this vulnerability within us. This deeply ingrained confidence in ourselves creates an environment that is conducive to dissatisfaction, resentment, and conflict. If time isn't ours, then who owns it, may I ask you? When our goals are derailed by the unforeseen events of daily life, what should we do? The idea that our time is personal is a deceptive trap that prevents us from seeing the bigger picture, which is that God's divine design and the human society are far bigger than ourselves. We fool ourselves into believing we have control over things, which makes us angry when unavoidable disruptions happen. This leads to a vicious cycle of whining and disappointment. But there's more wisdom here than meets the eye. We are invited to perceive a more freeing truth, our mutual dependence and the grace that sustains every minute of our existence when we let go of the false claim over our time and belongings. We discover something priceless when we let go of this delusion of control. The serenity that results from realizing we don't always have to be in charge of things. Furthermore, this serenity sets us free from bitterness, enabling us to live more appreciatively and receptively to God's work in our lives. This shift in viewpoint offers the chance to view life more lightheartedly, rather than as a call to apathy or nihilism. Every day and every moment is a gift when we learn to live a generous life and let go of our need to cling on to things so tightly. And it is in this place of thankfulness that we experience divine generosity, the same generosity that teaches us to give joyfully and engage more fully in mutual communion with the Creator and other people. So how are you going to use this truth? Will you continue to struggle for authority that you never had? Or are you going to let go of that weight and put your faith in God, who provides everything by His grace? We discover true freedom, the ability to love more fully, give more freely, and live with a peaceful heart when we let go of our false claims. With this new perspective, the concept of possession stops being a burden and becomes a chance to serve and be stewards, mirroring the limitless generosity of our Creator. As it said in Hebrews 11:6, seventh faith is a goal in and of itself, not a means to an end. Furthermore, one cannot please God without faith, since one must have faith in His existence and His ability to reward those who seek Him out sincerely. How often do we find ourselves attempting to accomplish goals by means of our faith? Do we look to God only for what He can offer us, or also for who He is? According to Screwtape, you've almost had your guy when you make faith a means and the world an end. Furthermore, it hardly matters what kind of worldly goal he is aiming for. As long as he believes that gatherings, leaflets, laws, campaigns, causes, and movements are more important to him than sacraments, charity, and prayers, we own him. And ours is more securely held the more religious on those criteria. This insight prompts us to consider a subtle but serious error that might creep into our spiritual journey and reduce faith to a tool for achieving ends. Its true purpose, to establish a close, real relationship between us and God, is lost when we use it only to pursue prosperity in this life. Faith ought to be our life's purpose and a means of approaching our Creator, not a means of obtaining success in this world. Consider a person who attends church every Sunday and engages in volunteer work, but who just does these things to please others or to obtain benefits. What's lacking in this situation? A genuine relationship with God. This is when faith turns into a tool rather than a goal. This perilous change of perspective, where faith is reduced to a means of achieving worldly objectives and the world itself becomes the ultimate aim, is indicative of a spiritual emptiness. Not that actions taken by others are unimportant. They are crucial, but they have to originate from a heart that is nourished by sacraments, prayer, and sincere altruism. If not, even the most altruistic endeavors risk becoming meaningless campaigns motivated by vanity. Ultimately, they cause us to get more distant from God instead of drawing us nearer to Him. Do we permit gatherings, causes, or movements to take precedence over our relationship with God? We need to consider what our faith's central tenet is. Real faith should not serve our self-interests, but rather draw us closer to God. It loses its transforming power, the ability to fill us with God's love and truth, and mold us into the likeness of Christ, when we use it as a tool to attain fleeting achievement. What is influencing your religion right now? Are you pursuing God primarily for Himself, or are you seeking Him because you think He is deserving of your attention? We find something far greater, a serenity and happiness that come from seeking God for who He is, not for what He can offer us, when we stop using faith as a negotiating chip. Acts of justice, compassion, and love are the natural byproducts of refocusing our lives on genuine faith. They are a living example of how living by faith transforms us and exalts God in everything. They are not the aim, but rather the outcome of a soul in connection with the divine. Eighth, be attentive and sober-minded. The devil is crafty and sly, as 1 Peter 5:8 warns us. The devil, who is your enemy, prowls around like a roaring lion, searching for prey. Have you ever considered the possibility that evil may be standing next to you and that you are unaware of it, since the adversary can work in the shadows and out of sight? As Screwtape notes, we currently operate under the policy of hiding. You should have no trouble maintaining the patient's ignorance, in my opinion. The fact that devils are primarily humorous characters in contemporary culture will come in handy if he starts to suspect you of being real. Offer him an image of anything wearing red tights and convince him that he won't believe in you if he can't believe in it. How often have you heard someone make lighthearted jokes about the devil as though he were a simple joke? This is a component of the plan. The instruction given by Screwtape reveals the dark force's crafty scheme to stay concealed and turn into a laughingstock. Dismissed by contemporary culture, the image of demons in red tights serves to deflect our focus from an actual danger. Evil exists, but we choose to dismiss it because it appears as something ludicrous, something that doesn't seem to warrant our attention. The adversary is crafty. In addition to using temptations to trick us, he also tries to prevent us from realizing that he even exists. We will never consider the devil to be a serious threat if we think of him as only a funny character. This is the clever part of the plan. Rather than proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that evil exists, it is meant to make us laugh as though it were a silly story. Consider it. How many times have we discounted spiritual concepts only because we are unable to see or touch them? This strategy is much more successful in a time when people are skeptical of science and have unquestioning faith in it. No evidence is required for the devil to deny his existence. All he has to do is convince us that the concept is absurd. Imagine then that you spend your entire life thinking that evil is a joke, only to learn the truth far too late. We underestimate how much is at risk in this situation. This goes beyond simple intellectual or religious issues. It's a profoundly spiritual matter that impacts all of us. Understanding this nuance is crucial so that we can get ready. Even though the devil works in the shadows, he is still real. With faith and discernment, we must be watchful and able to see past outward manifestations. The true struggle is fought on an unseen spiritual battlefield that calls for prayer, discernment, and a close relationship with God. It's time to acknowledge this spiritual reality and look past outward manifestations. Are you prepared to see what you have always wanted to see but has always been in front of you? The 9th commandment is to live in the now with an eye toward the future. How often do we become so preoccupied with the here and now that we lose sight of the bigger picture? Are we losing out on something important by putting off the now? Matthew 6:34 explains that you should not worry about tomorrow because it will worry about itself. There is enough trouble in each day on its own. According to Screwtape, although people exist in time, God, their enemy, destines them to exist forever. As a result, he would want them to be constantly thinking about either eternity, which is another way of saying that they should think about him, or the present. They could meditate on their eternal union with him or separation from him. Or they could listen to their conscience now and obey it by taking up their cross, accepting their grace, and being grateful for their current pleasure. Our task is to remove them from the present and the eternal. In light of this, we occasionally tempt a person, such as a widow or a scholar, to live in the past. However, this is not very useful because they do actually know something about the past, and that knowledge is finite and somewhat like to eternity. Making them live in the future is a lot better option. All of their passions already point in that direction due to biological necessity. Thus, both anxiety and optimism are stoked by that idea about the future. Furthermore, they are unaware of it, so when we force them to consider it, we force them to consider impossibilities. The future is, in a sense, the thing that is least like eternity. It is the most temporal aspect of time, as the past is frozen and no longer flows, while the present is filled with everlasting light. That is why we have supported all the theories of thinking that fix men's affections on the future, on the essence of temporality, like creative development, scientific humanism, or communism. That's why almost all vices have their roots in the future. Love looks to the present, gratitude to the past. Passion, ambition, fear, and avarice consider the future. How many times have we missed the little favors God bestows upon us today because we were too preoccupied worrying about what might go wrong tomorrow? A fundamental human conundrum is shown by Screwtape's tactic, the conflict between being fully present in the moment and being consumed by concern about the future. God invites us to live in the present moment while keeping an eternal perspective in our hearts. However, we are frequently tempted to lose sight of the present as we look ahead in fear or expectation. It is not necessary to ignore the future in order to follow this advice to live in the moment with an eye toward eternity. However, it serves as a reminder that life is about more than just passing issues. When our lives are given to God, they are imbued with eternal significance. We are called to live fully in accordance with the dictates of our conscience, accepting the crosses that God sends us, being grateful for the small pleasures that life brings, and accepting the grace of each day. We separate from the serenity God provides in the here and now when we allow ourselves to be carried away by obsession with the future, whether we are anticipating a catastrophe or dreaming of a paradise. And this diversion makes it harder for us to live in contact with God and sense His guidance, since it not only distances us from Him, but also keeps us anxious all the time. Consider it. How often do we break God's commands in the here and now? Because we are preoccupied with what might happen in the future. We believe that by giving in now we can ensure better things in the future. But this isn't authentic faith. Genuine faith is unaffected by our personal plans to succeed or find stability. It entails living in accordance with God's commands and fully relying on His providence, regardless of the situation or the immediate outcome. Navigating life with a heart rooted in God's love means looking to eternity while living in the present. It entails recognizing every moment as a heavenly opportunity and answering the call of duty with love and grace. Present. We find a tranquility that the future can never provide when we live in the present with our hearts fixed on God. How are things going for you now? Do you currently desire serenity from God, or are you merely preoccupied with your future? God invites us to live in the moment with thankfulness and faith in Him. The rest is up to you. 10th, greater love for ourselves and others results from humility. As stated in Philippians 2-4, do nothing out of conceit or self-serving ambition. Instead, put the interests of others above your own in a humble manner, with each of you considering the interests of the others before your own. Have you ever considered how a genuine humility may help us love others and ourselves more? Like Screwtape says, we have to think about the enemy's objectives in order to predict his plan. The opponent wants to put the man in a mindset where he can create the greatest cathedral in the world, know it is the best, and celebrate the fact without feeling any greater or lesser sense of satisfaction from having done it than if someone else had. The enemy wishes to eradicate their animal self-love as quickly as possible, but I believe that his long-term goal is to instill in them a new sort of self-love that is characterized by generosity and thankfulness for everyone, including themselves. I guess they will be allowed to love themselves as their neighbors once they have truly mastered the art of loving others as themselves. We must never lose sight of our enemy's most repulsive and puzzling characteristic. He always returns with his right hand what he has stolen with his left, for he truly loves the hairless bipeds he has made. How frequently do we find ourselves feeling proud or envious of others' accomplishments when we compare our own? What if, instead, we could celebrate other people's victories as though they were our own? We uncover a significant principle in the process. Genuine humility makes us more lovable rather than lessening us. Screwtape discloses with contempt that God's goal is to lead us to a condition of grace, where our accomplishments are acknowledged and honored without making us feel superior. God wants for us to view our achievements as a component of something bigger, where delight is derived from the total rather than from what is exclusively ours. Being humble doesn't mean losing our identity. Rather, it liberates our ego and makes it possible for us to see and love people more fully. We are readying ourselves for a different sort of self-love, a love that mirrors God's unselfish love, when we let go of our pride and accept humility. Generosity and thankfulness toward everyone, and not just ourselves, characterize this new love. Loving your neighbor as yourself and seeing the divine image in every individual does not mean lessening your own value, but rather increasing the value of everyone in your immediate vicinity. As we accept this humility, an unexpected thing occurs. We learn that all we offer to God is not really lost. God returns all we give up, our arrogance and self-centered self-love, into a more profound and all-encompassing love that doesn't distinguish between loving others and loving ourselves. He extends an invitation to love as freely and generously as He does. What will you decide on today, then? Will you persist in pursuing self-acclaim, or will you choose humility and let God's love shine through you to others? Saying yes to humility allows you to enter a limitless love that is unaffected by fear or pride. And in this love, we find ourselves in the most intimate relationship we have with the outside world. I hope that after reading through C.S. Lewis's 10 Thoughts as presented on Screwtape, you have gained a fresh outlook on your spiritual life, in addition to information. Every lesson has pushed us to overcome the obstacles and pitfalls we all encounter, while developing our love, humility, and faith. I hope these thoughts encourage you to live a more peaceful, purposeful life while keeping an eye on the hereafter. May humility lead to a greater love for God, others, and yourself, rather than be a burden. I want to lead a prayer now. I prefer concluding videos with a brief time for prayer to God. Heavenly Father, we come to you now, asking for your guidance and mercy. We are aware that the enemy will employ a variety of strategies to try to mislead us, but we are grateful that you are the source of the truth that sets us free. Now, we pray that you light up our hearts and brains so that we can see the traps all around us and avoid them. Lord, please assist us to keep our focus on you and realize that we must live our lives in the here and now, free from anxiety and concern about the future. May you find serenity in relying on your providence, understanding that you are the God who watches over you constantly. Lord, please give us a humble heart so that we can acknowledge our limitations and be content with what we have, rather than being consumed by pride or the wrong kind of possession. Teach us to love, not by comparison, but by charity and grace, the love that comes from you to ourselves and to others. Father, grant that we would always have genuine faith, a faith that is unaffected by the feelings of the present and that knows you are good, even while we are going through hardship. May we get closer to you, understanding that everything happens for our good, molding us into the people you want us to be and bringing us nearer to your heart. Help us discover the true joy that can only be experienced in your presence by delivering us from the temptation to find happiness in the things of this world. May we find the joy we seek in being in your presence and in the calm that is greater than our comprehension. Lord, help us to live for your honor rather than our own fame. Father, please help us to remember that the spiritual war is not against flesh and blood, but rather against the powers of evil that aim to keep us apart from you. May we recognize our accomplishments as a part of a larger whole and take equal delight in the victories of others as in our own. Give us the strength to withstand every temptation and the intelligence to recognize the cunning of the enemy. As your word states, may we constantly choose life in the Spirit, understanding that life and tranquility rule the mind ruled by the Spirit. Lastly, Lord, may our lives be characterized by faith and humility. May we rely on you for the future while living in the now, and may your kindness and grace lead the way in everything. We commit our lives to you, understanding that you are the only source of true happiness, contentment, and meaning in life. We are appreciative of your protection and guidance. We pray in the name of Jesus. Indeed. I think you've been really fortunate today, so please share your happiness with us by helping us disseminate this important information right now. You assist us in carrying out the instructions in Mark 16:15 by enjoying, subscribing, and sharing our films. Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to every creature, he commanded them. With this kind of information, we can collectively transform lives all across the world, and I think there would be a better world if God came first. We appreciate you staying through to the very end of the film and joining us in prayer. Being a part of your everyday life makes us delighted every time. May God keep blessing each of you and your loved ones. In the following video, I'll see you.